A huge drama is exploding today. This isn't just a bad day. It's a divine eruption, and it has your name written in protection across the sky. You need to hear this, and you need to hear it now. What's happening in the spirit realm today is not small, not symbolic, and not subtle. A massive drama is unfolding. It's loud, it's ugly, and it's sacred. Because this time, it's not your trauma being recycled. It's not your tears being ignored. It's not your prayers bouncing off the ceiling. This time, it's judgment. And it's targeted at the one who once made you feel like you didn't matter. Yes, the narcissist. The one who gaslit you, mocked your boundaries, twisted the truth, used your love as a leash, and stood smiling while you fell apart. The one who thought they could play God in your life. But today, God speaks louder. A drama is exploding that you didn't trigger. A chaos is stirring that you didn't create, and yet, somehow, you're at the center of it. Not as a target, but as a testimony, a witness to how heaven defends its own. Because while their wrath is rising, someone has been sent by the Most High, not to warn you, not to comfort you, but to shield you, to stand between you and the evil that once tried to ruin you. This isn't about revenge. This is about release. And if you feel something shifting in your chest, in your thoughts, in your surroundings, you're not wrong. You're picking up on a spiritual explosion that's been divinely timed and sovereignly allowed. You are no longer in danger. You are in protection. But to understand what God is doing now, you must first remember what the narcissist is losing. Objective measurements, panicking. They're losing grip on control. The narcissist may appear composed, still walking tall, still posting filtered smiles, still performing like they haven't lost a thing. But don't be fooled. What you see on the outside is not what's tearing them apart on the inside. Beneath the surface of their bravado, there's a storm raging. And it is not about you rejecting them. It's about them no longer being able to reach you. See, a narcissist isn't terrified of being alone. They're terrified of being unseen. They survive by being the center of someone else's world, by dictating the emotional temperature of the room, by keeping you second-guessing your worth until they've successfully convinced you that your peace depends on their approval. It was never love. It was possession cloaked in performance. It was control masked as connection. But now that you've pulled away, not just physically but spiritually, mentally, emotionally, the foundation of their entire identity is shaking. Their panic doesn't come from heartbreak, it comes from power loss. You were never just a person to them. You were a tool, a reflection of their control. And now, the mirror is broken. The platform has collapsed, and the script they've rehearsed for years is useless without an audience. They thought you'd always come back. They thought one breadcrumb message, one passive-aggressive question, one guilt-laced apology would be enough to reopen the door. But this time, the door didn't just close. It was sealed by the hand of God. You didn't ghost them. You were covered. You didn't disappear. You were hidden. And the difference between your silence and God's protection, they feel it in their soul. They just don't have the words to name it. That's why they're checking your social media 20 times a day, even if you've blocked them. That's why they're typing long texts and deleting them. That's why they're asking mutual friends if you've moved on, when what they're really wondering is whether they still hold space in your spirit. And when they realize the answer is no, when they sense they no longer live rent-free in your mind, that's when the panic sets in like a sickness. Because now, there's no one left to blame. No one left to bait, no one left to absorb the darkness they refuse to confront in themselves. For the first time, They are forced to sit in the echo chamber of their own unrepentant cruelty, and that's a horror show they can't stomach. Your absence has become their mirror, and it's showing them everything they pretended didn't exist. But here's the truth they'll never admit. They didn't lose you. God rescued you. They didn't get replaced, they got removed. And the protection around you now is not human, it's holy. You didn't cut off communication to punish them. You stopped responding because heaven stepped in and disconnected the line. You're not unreachable out of spite. You're unreachable because God refused to let you bleed again. This panic they feel, it's not just emotional, it's spiritual. Their soul knows it's lost something it didn't deserve to hold in the first place. And no amount of anger, drama, or emotional warfare can reopen what God Himself has shut. Because this is no longer about a relationship ending. This is about a cycle breaking. This is about the judgment that comes when God defends His children, not just with comfort, but with fire. So yes, the narcissist is spiraling. But it's not your responsibility to catch them. You tried grace. You tried mercy. You even tried silence. None of it mattered. Because none of it was ever enough to awaken someone who worships control more than truth. But now, heaven has intervened, and you've been moved, not just into safety, but into sovereignty. What they feel now isn't abandonment. It's consequence. And what comes next is not about what they lost. It's about who God is sending in their place to stand between you and anything that ever dared to break you again. God intervened and sent someone to stand for you. There is a quiet kind of rescue that doesn't arrive with flashing lights or loud announcements. It enters your life slowly, steadily, and then suddenly you realize you're not bleeding alone anymore. That's what the narcissist never counted on. They were confident that the damage they did was permanent. They believed they'd hollowed out your soul so thoroughly that no one would ever want to touch what they left behind. But what they forgot, or what they never truly understood, is that God has always been watching, and He doesn't rescue with the permission of your enemies. He rescues because He loves you too much to leave you where cruelty tried to keep you. This wasn't just a healing process, it was a spiritual extraction. You didn't simply move on, you were removed. Taken out of the pit they buried you in. And in your place, God planted a shield, a living, breathing barrier between you and the very torment that once had unrestricted access to your life. That person, they're not random, they're not someone new. They are a divine assignment sent from heaven, not to complete you, not to carry you, but to cover you. They weren't attracted by charm. They were pulled by purpose. While the narcissist saw your wounds as opportunities to exert control, this person sees your wounds and treats them like sacred ground. Not something to manipulate, but something to protect. They don't need you to perform, explain, or earn anything. They're not here because you were impressive. They're here because God instructed them to be, and obedience brought them to your door. You don't owe anyone an explanation for the peace you're finally beginning to feel. It may not even make sense to you yet, how someone could walk into your life and not flinch at your story, not pity your pain, not press you for details. But that's the mark of someone who wasn't self-appointed. That's the evidence of someone God sent. They don't come to fix, they come to fortify. And it's shaking the narcissist to their core. Not because they still love you. Love was never their motive. Control was. They're not mourning your absence. They're panicking over the void of power. They're realizing they no longer have access to your inner world, and what terrifies them more than rejection is the loss of influence. Their identity was built around having emotional authority over you. Being the storm and the calm, the one who wounded and then offered temporary comfort. But now, all of that is gone. Not because you blocked them, not because you ghosted them, but because God stepped in and shut the door from the inside. This person, the one now standing beside you, is more than support. They are resistance, a shield against the very cycles you once couldn't escape. They don't raise their voice, but their presence alone declares, this soul is no longer available to destruction. They didn't come to replace the narcissist, they came to remove the residue of their control. They are a witness to your worth, not a reward, but a restoration. And let's be honest, you prayed for this. Maybe not in those exact words, maybe not with perfect clarity, but deep in your spirit you cried out for protection that didn't demand performance, for safety that didn't have a price, for someone who wouldn't be drawn to your pain but to your potential. And even if you didn't have the words to ask, God had already written the answer. The narcissist feels the shift. That's why they're reacting. That's why they're watching. That's why they're scrambling to insert themselves back into your atmosphere. Not out of repentance, but because the power they once abused is no longer theirs to hold. They can sense that something holy is standing in their way, and it rattles them, because they've never been afraid of you, but they are absolutely terrified of what's now protecting you. So, don't second-guess this season. Don't explain away the blessing. Don't shrink the miracle down into a coincidence to make others more comfortable. What you're experiencing is not an emotional rebound. It's a divine reinforcement. And you have every right to stand in it, grow in it, and heal inside of it without guilt. If this truth resonates with you, if something in your heart knows that you've been rescued, not just emotionally but spiritually, hold on to that peace. You didn't imagine the danger, and now you're not imagining the protection. Comment below with the words, God sent someone to stand for me. Not for attention, not for pride, but as a declaration that you know heaven stepped in, and you'll never be left uncovered again. But what happens when the one who once held power realizes that authority has been stripped from them entirely? When control slips through their fingers and silence speaks louder than anything they can scream, the narcissist's wrath is loud, but it cannot touch you. There's a special kind of fury that ignites inside someone who realizes they no longer have power where they once had complete control. The narcissist's wrath isn't about loss, it's about disempowerment. It's not love that fuels their outrage, it's entitlement that's been denied. And now that they can no longer reach you, shape you, or haunt you from a distance, their world, the one built on manipulation and silent dominance, begins to crumble, not privately, but loudly. They've always needed chaos to survive. They don't function in peace, because peace doesn't center them. Peace makes them irrelevant. And now, as the storm they once used to trap you begins to collapse, they're left with no script to follow. No role to play, no spotlight to stand in, and so they rage. They throw words like knives and wear blame like perfume. They seek new victims, but none of them satisfy, because none of them give them what you did. Unguarded access to something sacred. What burns them most is that you're no longer participating. You're not reacting. You're not defending yourself. You're not explaining your silence. And in the narcissist's world, silence isn't absence, it's rebellion. To them, not responding means you're defying the narrative. You're rejecting their control. You're rewriting the ending without their permission. And that, to a narcissist, is the ultimate insult. So they lash out, sometimes directly, sometimes through whispers, sometimes by trying to rewrite history to whoever will listen. They accuse you of being the problem. They weaponize vulnerability. They paint themselves as victims to keep their image intact. But the more they speak, the more heaven exposes what they were trying to hide. The wrath that once silenced you is now just noise echoing into a void where you no longer dwell. And even when the attacks seem targeted, passive-aggressive messages, vague posts, rumors, or thinly veiled attempts to bait you back in, There is a holy covering around you that renders every dart ineffective. You may hear the echoes of their fury, but they cannot pierce what God has protected. What used to make your hands shake now barely makes your spirit flinch. Not because you're numb, but because you're no longer standing alone. The wrath of the narcissist used to feel like thunder, shaking everything inside you, making you question your truth, your worth, your memory. But now their thunder rolls and you remain unmoved. That's not indifference. That's deliverance. What was once a battlefield has become sacred ground, and they can't re-enter what heaven has sealed off. Sometimes their anger escalates because they want to test the fence line. They want to know if they still have spiritual clearance to reach you, but every time they try, it costs them. They encounter resistance not just from you, but from something deeper, the presence of God Himself acting as a firewall against their access. You may not even realize how many times you were almost provoked, almost pulled back in, if not for divine interruption. And here's the part they'll never admit, not to you, not even to themselves. They're not just angry at you. They're angry at the God who gave you back to yourself. Because when they lost you, they didn't just lose a person. They lost an altar they built to their own ego. And now that altar lies in ruins. Your life no longer testifies of their influence. It testifies of your redemption, and that burns them in a way no argument ever could. Their wrath may be loud, but it's hollow. Their efforts may be public, but they are powerless, because what they're trying to fight now is no longer just your will, it's the will of God. And you are not up for debate. You are not returning to the pit they shaped for you. That season is over. The door is closed. The chains are broken, and the blood on your hands from years of emotional bleeding has been washed by something holy, final. Even now, as they spiral, you stand still, not because you're avoiding conflict, but because you no longer need to prove that you survived. You're walking proof of divine vindication. The best answer to their wrath is not your retaliation, it's your restoration. And that is exactly what they cannot touch. They lost access, they lost narrative control, they lost their power, not because you retaliated, but because God reclaimed you. Let the wrath rise, let the drama unfold, let the voices roar and the pride inflate. It cannot touch you anymore. And while their rage burns like wildfire in the distance, someone has stepped closer, not to fuel the fire, but to stand with you in it, unshaken and unafraid. This person God sent isn't afraid of the fire. Some people walk into your life because they're curious. Others come because they're lonely. But every now and then, rarely, and always by divine assignment, someone shows up because they've been sent. Not by chance, not by impulse, but by the prompting of heaven. And you know it, not by what they say, but by what they're not afraid to face. This person isn't intimidated by the weight you carry. They don't flinch when your past begins to surface, and they don't recoil when your voice trembles trying to explain what you've been through. Where others made you feel like your story was too much, this person treats your survival like a sacred victory, not because they idolize your pain, but because they see the fire you walked through and recognize the God who walked with you. They weren't sent to be your distraction, they were sent to be your witness. They don't look away when the shadows return. They don't question your triggers or doubt your discernment. They understand that what you carry is not baggage but battle scars, and they know how to stand beside someone who's fought hell and made it back. The narcissist used your vulnerability as a weapon. They studied your softness just to twist it. They promised safety while preparing sabotage. They offered love with hooks in it. But this person is different, not perfect, but different, because they come with clean hands. They don't need to control you to feel secure. They don't require your silence to feel strong. They are steady because they are anchored in something deeper than themselves. And the reason they're not afraid of the fire is because they've walked through some flames of their own. They know what it feels like to be misjudged, mislabeled, misunderstood. They know the weight of betrayal and the ache of prayers answered too slowly. But instead of turning bitter, they allowed the fire to refine them. So now when they stand next to you, they don't just see your beauty, they see your ashes too. And they're not moved. In fact, they've been prepared for this. They've been trained in silence, forged in waiting, and matured in obedience. God didn't send someone flashy. He sent someone faithful, someone who knows how to keep watch in the night without demanding the sunrise, someone who doesn't run when things get hard, but leans in with spiritual authority, not because they want to fix you, but because they respect the cost it took for you to survive. They carry peace like a shield and speak truth like a sword, but they use both gently. They understand that you've had to defend yourself for so long you barely know how to rest. They know your instincts are still wired for survival, and they don't take it personally when you pull back or test their sincerity. They simply stay, not demanding, not retreating, just steady. That's how you know they were sent. Because the fire that once scorched you doesn't scare them. It reminds them of the calling. It reminds them that their presence isn't about romance or rescue. It's about standing firm while heaven finishes what it started in you. They weren't sent to be your shield instead of God, but to be evidence of that shield. And what's most humbling is that they don't even try to be heroic. They don't announce their loyalty or market their strength. They just show up, consistently, gently, without fanfare. And in a world that once demanded your performance, their quiet constancy feels like a miracle. They are not afraid of the fire because they know who stands in it with you. They don't run from your intensity. They don't need you to be smaller to feel close. They don't dim your light to shine brighter themselves. They recognize your calling, and they know how much it cost you to still believe in love, in God, in hope. The narcissist exploited your belief. They took advantage of your loyalty and mistook your grace for weakness. But this person treats your belief like holy ground, not because they think you're fragile, but because they know you're favored. And when the heat of the past rises, when the voices of shame try to return, when the accusations begin to echo again in your mind, this person doesn't silence you. They remind you that you are more than what hurt you. They speak to the healed version of you that's still being formed, not rushing it, but protecting it with every ounce of their presence. This is not the person you dreamed of when you were lonely. This is the person God dreamed of when He planned your recovery. And they are not afraid of the fire, because the one who sent them walks in it too. But as the flames exposed what could be endured, they also revealed what and who was never meant to last through the fire with you. The drama wasn't sent to break you. It was allowed to reveal who's truly for you. There's a certain kind of chaos that doesn't come to destroy. It comes to divide. Not divide as the world does, with hatred and strife, but with clarity and divine separation. It doesn't scream or crash like thunder. Instead, it rises like smoke from a fire heaven permitted, not to consume you, but to expose what was never real in the first place. When the drama erupted, the betrayal, the accusations, the smear campaigns, the emotional warfare, it felt like a personal attack. You questioned your worth. You wondered what you had done wrong. But with time and with distance, you began to see something deeper. This wasn't simply fallout from a broken relationship. This was a heavenly sorting. God wasn't punishing you. And in order to do that, he had to allow what was false to fail, publicly and painfully. You prayed for truth. You begged for discernment. You asked to see who was really with you. And when the truth came, it came wearing drama like a mask. It came through tension, through separation, through people walking away, not because you wronged them, but because they were never rooted in truth to begin with. The narcissist played a central role in this revelation. Their wrath created the waves, but God used the storm. It shook your circle, pulled at the fabric of every connection, and in the aftermath, only what was authentic remained. The rest, it faded, ran, or exposed itself under pressure. And though that pruning hurt, it also healed. It was in the silence after the storm that you began to see who never asked if you were okay, who disappeared when you stopped explaining yourself, who believed lies without checking in, who preferred the narcissist's version of you because it fit better with their own assumptions. It was heartbreaking, not because you lost them, but because you realized they were never truly with you to begin with. And just as important, you saw who stayed. You saw who called when things got quiet, who didn't need all the details to believe in your goodness, who waited instead of judging, who prayed instead of prying, who showed up not out of obligation, but out of something real, something God breathed. This is what the drama was for, not for spectacle, not for shame, but for separation, to divide between performance and presence, between those who clapped when you were bleeding and those who covered you while you healed. Sometimes we think exposure means headlines, something obvious and loud, but spiritual exposure often looks like people drifting. It looks like invitations disappearing. It looks like sudden distance, strange silence, or subtle betrayal. But in that space of confusion, God is answering the very prayer you once whispered in desperation. Lord, show me who's real. And he did. But he didn't stop there, because this wasn't just about who you lost. It was about what you gained. A new foundation, a new circle, a new confidence rooted not in who accepts you, but in who chose you. And here's the deeper truth. You didn't need the drama to find God, but God used the drama to reveal himself more clearly. He let you walk through it, not because you deserved pain, but because you needed perspective. There are some truths you can't see until you've been dropped. Some loyalties you won't discern until betrayal empties the room. Some prayers you can't pray until silence forces you to your knees. You're not walking with less now. You're walking with what actually matters. And there's a kind of holy quiet that comes after divine separation. It doesn't feel victorious at first. It feels lonely, confusing, even unfair. But slowly the peace comes, the clarity deepens, the noise dies down, and what's left is weightless, pure, and unshakably real. You stop chasing validation. You stop trying to explain what God already vindicated. You stop apologizing for growing. And in that stillness, you start hearing the voice of God more clearly than ever. Now that the false is gone, let me show you what was always true. The narcissist may have been the detonator, but they were never the author. They lit the match, but God controlled the flame, and what they meant to burn down, God used to refine. You didn't come out of the fire the same person. You came out marked by truth, surrounded by clarity, and carried by the very hand that allowed the storm in the first place. What was allowed to break you ended up revealing what couldn't be broken. And that, more than anything, is what the drama was for. And now that the false has fallen away, heaven is gently ushering you into something new. Not survival, but sacred stability. You're stepping into a different season, safe, seen, and shielded. There is a moment in every spiritual journey when the storm stops, not because the skies are clear, but because you've been moved out from under it. Not through your own strength, not by your own timing, but because God said, "That's enough. My child has endured long enough." And now here you are, not standing in the ashes of what broke you, but standing in the clarity of what couldn't. This is not the same season that nearly destroyed you. This is not the same version of life that cost you sleep, sanity, and self-worth. This is something new, something sacred, something heaven has been preparing behind the scenes while you were still wiping tears in secret. You're not just stepping into peace, you're stepping into protection. What once made you flinch no longer has access. What once had the power to unravel you now only reminds you of how far you've come. This is the divine pivot, the moment where God doesn't just remove the weapon formed against you, but builds a wall so it can't even be lifted again. And it's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's quiet, so quiet that you might miss it if you're still expecting rescue to feel like a spectacle. But this season isn't about surviving. It's about settling. Not settling for less, but settling into the place that was prepared for you. A place where you are no longer questioned, minimized, or used. A place where you are safe, seen, and shielded. Safe, not because danger no longer exists, but because God has stationed His hand between you and anything that ever tried to redefine your worth. You no longer live in response to chaos. You're no longer walking on eggshells, analyzing every text, reading between the lines of someone else's instability. You have been spiritually relocated, and now peace is not just an emotion, it's your environment. Seen, not in the way the narcissist once saw you to manipulate your softness, but truly seen, known, heard, not because you're screaming louder, but because you've stopped trying to convince people who never wanted to understand you in the first place. There's a clarity now in your presence, a quiet authority that tells the world, I don't need to be explained, I need to be respected. And those who carry truth can feel it on you. Those who carry darkness can't get near it. Shielded, not by your own walls, but by something stronger. This time, it's not your emotional exhaustion that's keeping the wrong people away. It's God's refusal to allow the enemy access again. The narcissist can rage, they can plot, they can disguise their re-entry, but they'll find every door sealed, every spiritual path blocked, every open wound already closed by the hand of a healer who was never distracted. You've outgrown survival. You've matured beyond reaction. You've crossed over from God, please get me through this, to God, thank you for delivering me. And now you walk differently. Not with arrogance, but with assurance. Not needing to prove anything, but simply carrying the peace of someone who knows they are finally under the shadow of the Almighty. This new season may not be flashy. It may not come with applause or recognition, but it comes with weight, the holy kind, the kind of weight that says, you've been trusted with peace, carry it well, let it restore you, let it redefine you. You're not the same, and that's the point. You don't chase closure from people who are spiritually bankrupt. You don't shrink to fit into places you've already outgrown. You don't explain what God has confirmed, and you don't panic when the past starts knocking, because this time it's not you who answers, it's the presence that surrounds you. You're stepping into a season that doesn't just comfort your wounds, it honors your endurance. It doesn't just soothe your heart, it shields your soul. And no matter what noise rises behind you, no matter how familiar the chaos sounds, your spirit knows you're not in that place anymore. Not in your heart, not in your thoughts, not in your destiny. You are elsewhere now, and you are safe. You are seen. You are shielded.